Welcome back. So today I will be ranking Colorado's 14ers. So have you ever hiked a Colorado 14er? And if you have, are you interested in hiking more and curious about them? Well, today I will be ranking them on 3 different categories. So me personally, my goal is to actually bag as many 14ers as I can. And to date, I have done 10 of them, one of which I have done twice. So the categories I will be using to rank them today are my favorite overall 14er, the 14er that I found to be the easiest, and then the best non-standard route. All right, before we get started, my name is Heather. For those of you that are new to my channel, and on trail, I am known as Indy. All right, so let's get started. So the 14ers that will be included in this ranking that I've completed so far are Mount Yale, Mount Belford, Mount Elbert, Mount Shavano, Mount Huron, Huron Peak, Mount Massive, Mount Oxford, and Handies Peak. I also attempted Mount Harvard via the non-standard route, but turned around at about 300 to 500 feet from the summit because I felt unsafe. So that is not included in this ranking. All right, so the category of best overall 14er. For this one, I actually chose 2, Huron and Handies Peak. So starting off with Huron Peak. Huron Peak sits at just over 14,000 feet, coming in at a whopping 14,006 feet, and is part of the Sawatch Range. We started at the Lake Ann Trailhead, which is just outside of a little old mining town called Winfield. This route is a Class 2 difficulty with moderate exposure and takes you up Huron's northwest slope. It is an 11-mile round trip hike, depending on how far up the 4-wheel drive road you can get. If your vehicle will go pretty far up, it could be as little as 7 miles. So once you get to the actual Huron Peak trailhead, you begin descending a somewhat steep set of switchbacks, which will eventually bring you up to tree line, and it opens up to some wide, expansive views, and you are in a high basin. If you do this at the right time of year, you can have some beautiful wildflowers in this area, and you will then get a little climb out of the basin with another set of switchbacks and some more breathtaking views. As you approach the ridge, you will hit some boulder fields where the trail becomes a little bit more rugged, and it takes you along the ridge crest. And then at about like 300 to 400 feet, the trail does come a little bit less obvious at this point, but it's still somewhat easy to follow. And then at the top, you get some 360-degree views of the surrounding peaks, including the famous 3 Apostles, which is a set of 13,000 footers. And for me, this trail had it all. It had breathtaking views, the open expanses, some fun climbs as you neared that summit, and is my favorite overall 14er. So next up being Handies Peak, which sits at 14,048 feet and is part of the incredible San Juan Mountains and is accessible outside of Lake City, Colorado. We took the Silver Creek Grizzly Gulch Trailhead, which is considered a Class 2 difficulty route with moderate exposure and is about an 8-mile round trip hike. I would start off by saying that the road to the trailhead, though, is not for the faint of heart. It continues to increase in difficulty as you near the trailhead. The road becomes narrower with some extreme drop-offs along the way. So once you do make it finally to the trailhead, you will start off by crossing the Gunnison River as you head into the trees. And then it is not long before you open up into some wide expanses into the Grizzly Gulch. And this area is also full of wildflowers depending on the time of year that you complete the hike. And then it crosses a nice little stream, and the views are absolutely stunning. At a little over 13,000 feet, the trail does start to get a little bit steeper, and there are some sections with some loose gravel where you really have to watch your footing so that you don't slip. But at the top, you get the views of the amazing Cragley San Juan Mountains, which was incredible. All right, so moving on to my next category of the 14er that I found to be easiest. I will start off by saying and stressing that no 14er is actually easy. I mean, you are hiking to the top of a 14,000 foot mountain. But of those that I have completed, this is the one that I found to be the easiest. So Mount Elbert is actually the tallest 14er in Colorado and sits at 14,438 feet and is also part of the Sawatch Range. You can access this trailhead from outside of Leadville. And like many 14ers, there's many different routes that you can take to the top of a 14er, which impact its difficulty, its risk exposure levels, and that sort of thing. The route that I took was up the northeast ridge, which is considered a class 1 with very low exposure, low route finding and commitment. And it is about a 9 3/4 like round trip hike. We actually did this as an overnighter. And so we started at the south like Elbert trailhead and then hiked in via the Colorado Trail, stayed overnight, and then the next morning went up the actual trailhead to Mount Elbert. I took my then 10 and 8-year-old daughters who are Indiana Flatlanders with no real hiking experience and who had never completed a 14er before. And while there might have been a lot of complaining and perhaps bribing with candy, they did make it to the top. It is a very gradual ascent initially. I will say at around a little over 13,000 feet. The train does get somewhat steeper, but eventually flattens out somewhat. To me, if 10-year-old and 8-year-old Flatlanders from Indiana can do this route, I can pretty much confidently say that this route to Mount Elbert is the easiest 14er that I have bagged. All right, so moving on to the next category of best non-standard route. And the two mountains that I chose for this category are Mount Belford and Mount Yale. So starting off with Mount Belford, which sits at 14,202 feet and is part of the Sawatch Range. So we took the non-standard route out of Pine Creek, where the Pine Creek Trail intersects with the Colorado Trail and goes through the Missouri Basin. And it actually passes an old cabin known as Little John's Cabin, which is where two brothers way back in the day were miners working for the bismuth mines. And the cabin actually still has quite a few old interesting artifacts in it that you can kind of see from just looking along the outside. So this route is actually not listed on the 14ers.com website, but is a really nice route through the basin and actually offers a lot of solitude since it's not very popular. It then takes you up Elkhead Pass, which then takes you up around kind of towards the base of or Missouri Mountain, where you then loop up around towards the summit of Mount Belford. Once nearing the summit, it does get a lot steeper there. There's a steep climb with some scree before beginning the actual ascent to the summit. Our initial plan was to also do Mount Oxford, which is kind of a nice little climb over from Mount Belford, but some weather came in and ultimately we decided not to do it because we didn't feel that it was safe. But this route was really, really nice. I also did Mount Belford via the standard route another time where I was able to complete Oxford, which is also very nice. But if you're wanting a little bit more solitude and some really nice views, I highly recommend this route. All right, so next moving on to Mount Yale, which sits at 14,196 feet and is also part of the Sawatch Range in the San Isabel National Forest. The route we took is a much longer and more difficult route than the standard route out of Denny Creek and is a 10.5-mile round trip hike with a class 2 rating and over 5,000 feet of elevation gain. So to start, we started at the Avalanche trailhead outside of Buena Vista. You hike up to the saddle. Once you reach the saddle, you essentially just head due west through the trees. After you kind of get through tree line, you'll start to see a little trail from there. And then from here, the views just open up and you can kind of proceed along the ridge. This is a really fun route. There's a lot of rock scrambling, some bouldering, there's route finding. It can be very challenging at times. The trail is not evident, but your efforts are absolutely paid off with the views once you get to the top. And even as you're approaching the summit, I loved every single thing about this route. While it was challenging with the route finding and the scrambling, I never felt unsafe. And it is definitely my favorite non-standard route, and it's actually almost made the list of favorite overall 14ers. So I highly recommend Mount Yale, and I recommend this route. All right, thank you for watching, and I hope that you enjoyed. Once you get to the actual Huron Peak